Alrighty, hello everyone. Welcome back. Welcome to episode 7 of Mistresses Behind the Myth. And here comes Alyssa. Hello, Alyssa.
Hey, Julie. What's up, mortals?
What's up, everyone? All of you mortals out there, we have a complicated story for you guys out there. It's a good story, but complicated.
Oh my gosh, I just finished, I literally finished reading it. I was cutting for time, but I read over a little bit of it at the beginning of the week. Then you called me in the middle. And so I was like, okay, what is she talking about with all this complicated stuff? And I was like, because I thought it was pretty cut and dry. Oof. I finished it and I realized that none of the goddesses in Egypt do what they're supposed to do. Oh my goodness. I'm like, honestly, these stories should just be called "No One Does What Their Name Specifies."
Well, let's say this. I said this before, and I will keep saying it. These god of Egypt, they are they're hard worker. They do everything. They step on each other's toes to do their work. They're very well provided for themselves. They're like Gen Z on caffeine, basically.
They are absolute powerhouses. It is unbelievable. I literally have so much fun reading about them because it's always you never get, you get a little bit of mess in there, a little bit of drama to keep you going. But most of it is just you being in awe at how much they do, how much they were a part of the Egyptians' lives.
Yeah,
there is just so rich, and I'm just so surprised through all the conquering and everything that this even survived. It's pretty convoluted, I'm not gonna lie. It gets very confusing. There's a lot of missing pieces, but the fact that the good bulk of it survived this long, I'm actually really impressed.
Yes, that is very true. Well, when we say survive, we really mean survive. These Egyptians are so good at record keeping. It's so unfreaking believable. And I love it. And if you guys have not read our title yet, today we are going to be talking about the goddess Hathor, the goddess of love. Basically, this powerhouse of a woman who's a mystery and complication.
Wow. Yeah. Guys, I don't even think I could do an entire, an opening for this. If I had an opening, it would just be it would literally just be buckle your seatbelts. Literally.
Basically.
Buckle your seatbelts. This is not what you think at all. This is not your everyday classic goddess of love. She truly is something to behold.
Yes, basically. Because we usually start out with Alyssa's introduction, but today we don't have one, and just because we decided we need to jump straight into the story because there's nothing that will prepare you for this.
Yeah, Aphrodite, move over.
Oh. Okay, so
there we go. That's our introduction. Aphrodite, move over. You have been replaced.
Okay, great. So, oh dear. Okay, to be honest, seriously, this woman is a powerhouse. She's badass woman. She's just all around the most just very favorable. She has a lot of duties, a lot of jobs, and that's why we're gonna straight into it. It's Lov'n time in Egypt.
Funny enough, it's the longest story. This is the most complicated I've seen Egypt get so far, and I'm actually almost scared for us to go into the next 2 weeks for our next Egyptian story. This is a lot, but it's funny enough.
I like it. I do like it. I like it a lot. The more complicated, the better. I mean, we're not going back to Greek anytime soon. So we have our fair share of roller coaster, and I think this is not the tip yet, but we'll see. So first, of course, welcome you guys into the Hathor of ancient Egypt, and we're going to have 3 sections for this videcast today. We're going to have Hathor's origin, and then we're going to talk about how she was worshipped in ancient Egypt and probably even still today. And then at the end, we're going to give Alyssa her famous popular culture hour. It's not actually an hour, guys, so don't panic. It's not actually an hour. Okay. So great.
Yeah, this one won't be. We said that with Bastet and Isis, but pop culture with them is that's on another level.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Okay, let's just see. Let's see how much time is gonna buy us. But yeah. So origin. We have Origin. She is known as the daughter of Ra, the supreme sun god. And in some sources, and I highlight some sources, not all sources, this is not definite.
Most sources, though. Most of the
Most
ones I
sources.
found.
In some sources, she is depicted as Horus's wife. And Hathor, I love this statement. This is not my statement, by the way. Credit to the author of this, but I love how they put this statement together. Hathor is the Egyptian patroness of lovers, the goddess of the sky, the protector of women and children, and beloved of both the living and the dead. That's all you need to know about this woman, really.
Pretty
That's
much.
so
Like,
cool.
if you were thinking goddess of love, yeah, you were thinking of the wrong type. I know a lot of people probably came on here and they're like, oh, goddess of love. So, like, sexual love, like romantic love. No, no, no. We mean she covers all boundaries, from the women to the children to the men to the protectors to the kings to the goddesses of the
Yes.
sky. Like, literally, she is. I know I said Isis is the mother of Egypt, and she truly is the mother of Egypt, but wow,
Oh, we're going to get
Hathor.
into that soon. We're going to get into that soon. So hold your horses, people, because I know what you're thinking. But just wait until we get into her story, or more than likely stories. We have more than one, definitely. So yes, on that note, Alyssa, I will definitely answer that question of yours, because I know I have been tipping Alyssa off these past few weeks. I mean, past few days. It feel like weeks. This week has been so long. I
Yeah,
don't know.
honestly.
Does anyone feel like that? This week has been so long for me.
Honestly,
Mm-hmm.
it's been going. It's been a week. I've just kind of been like, oh, what day is it? It's like, it's a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I don't know.
Yeah,
Lost
it's
track of
been a
time.
really long week for me. And I don't know how people feel out there, but it's been a stressful week. And we've been talking about this like fragmently and mostly when we're sleep deprived. So it's not really been going well. So there are like fragments of things that we have not gotten together yet. We
But yeah,
apologize for that.
Hathor's story is definitely not something you wanna take on when you are sleep deprived, because wow, she takes on so many different forms.
Seriously.
Like,
Uh-huh. Seriously. I have caffeine, so I'm fine. We're definitely fine for this podcast.
I've been chugging boba, so
Oh, wow.
that's close.
Okay. Another form of caffeine. Great. Okay. Back to the topic. So sorry, guys. She is connected to the sky, the movement of the planets, the birth, rebirth, death, fertility, whatever, love. Anything that you think can happen, she does it.
Yeah, honestly, I'm not even gonna lie. Like, I came in as well. Like, I remember probably looking up Hathor when I was younger, and I don't remember her having so much to do with, like, literally. You're right. She basically covers every goddess we've talked about, or every goddess that we have dissed or kind of put together. She basically covers all their roles, and I noticed that a lot in Egypt. Like, it's prominent, actually. Fun fact: it's prominent in Greek mythology as well as Roman mythology for their gods and goddesses to clash. That's usually due to a lot of
Yeah.
plagiarism, informal plagiarism that happened between the Romans and the Greeks.
Yes.
It also might have been due to the way they conquer. The way they conquered back then is not very similar to how we're used to kind of European, Euro Asian conquering now. Then people, when they were conquering, they would actually adopt your culture into their own, so it kind of got
Yes.
fused together rather than completely eliminated, which I appreciate that much more than completely
Yes.
eliminating someone's culture. It's very upsetting to me when I see that. So it's I like it better when it's been fused together, because at least you can kind of pick out the pieces, see what puzzle pieces used to fit where. But with Hathor, I'm not gonna lie, it's literally like she literally it with Egyptian gods, it's on a different level. With Greek
Yeah.
gods, you have synonymous gods. You have Helios, like, for example, Helios and Apollo, both the gods of the sun. And it's kind of repetitive and kind of confusing, because you're like, okay, why would you have two gods of the sun? One's the sun chariot and the music and everything great, and the other is kind of just a sub god of the sun. But in Egypt, it seems like, and I'll get to this later in pop culture hour. I won't take up too much time talking about this, but it is something I want to point out, that in Egypt, like, as soon as we get to her origin story, we're going to call her, I'm not going to spoil it, but we are going to call her the mother of fertility. And
Yes.
at this point, I'm pretty sure everyone who's been following us is kind of tired of hearing that. They're kind of like, okay,
Oh.
well, who's the real mother of fertility? Everyone at this point is, you know, the mother of Egypt and the goddess of fertility. That is something very interesting. Hopefully, when we get to the end of this, we'll be able to explain that, especially with her
Yeah.
origin story
Definitely.
and pop culture. But that is something I do want to point out. It's very interesting that Egyptians do that. There's a lot of clash and a lot of run over, more than you know.
Yes, definitely. And actually, now that you mentioned the adopting of culture, that is a very big point in actually today's podcast as well. So just hold on to that. And we're going to get to it very quickly. I promise it's going to be very quick. And that is actually a very good tactic that's being used because in a lot of cases, when you see these great conquerors, they are adapting. And that's how these stories even get to like, you know, halfway across the hemisphere or even halfway across the globe. Like, you will see why in just a second. So, here we have origin stories. I do apologize first because I know that there are a lot. And when I say a lot, there are many, 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 many origin stories that deal with Hathor. But today, I decided to dissect down. I decided to reduce down to telling you guys two stories that will make sense later when because I have a little of speculations here and there. And the reason why I only put two down as the origin story because I think that these two are more relevant just because of the amount of time they show up, the amount of time you come across it. And I know there's a lot of them out there, but I think this would fit into our vibecast today and our speculations the most.
Not only that, they also connect. If, like I said, if you've been following the other episodes,
yes,
if you have not followed the other episodes, I highly, highly suggest you go back and watch them. They're very interesting, very fun. We have some nice interviews that we did with our very own Egyptian queen. If she's out there, shout out to you, Mena. But
she's not out there.
Aw,
I'm sorry. She's probably preparing for school now.
It's all right.
Preparing for work.
Give her shout out. We still should give her shout out anyway. We were really grateful that she did that. But if you haven't been following, definitely go follow because this story really, honestly, kind of wraps up all the other stories. There's so much connection between the two main stories that we're using today.
Yeah, and I will explain that deeper when we get to it. But now let's jump into the story because here's the thing. There is one legend, and you guys, if you guys have joined us last 2 weeks, you guys remember the story of Bastet and Sekhmet, and this has something to do with it. So in one of the legend, it has stated that the god Ra has unleashed Sekhmet to destroy humanity as a punishment because they stopped worshiping him per se because he was getting old and kind of clueless. What was that word you used again last week?
Senile is the word.
Yes. So basically he got mad. He released this goddess by plucking out his eye. Long story. Go back and listen to our other podcasts, please. But basically he sent this lioness, ferocious goddess out there and she destroyed a lot of humans, like majority of the Egyptian population per se. And they don't
mass genocide
basically, and they don't know what to do to contain her. What can we do? So they make up this potion that's like booze and human blood like kind of mixed together. They set it out for her. She drank it. She passed out, and when she woke up, she became Hathor because her most of her ferociousness, most of her fierceness has been taken out by Ra. And in some story, it says that she woke up as Hathor. I know that you don't really want to touch this subject, Alyssa, because it's so complicated. But let's just say that in some story, she did woke up as Hathor, a completely different goddess, a completely different person from her former self. And that's why in some cases she's considered like the goddess of joy and drunkenness as well, because when she was Sekhmet, she was so fierce that they had to put her down, not really putting her down, just, you know, drug her a little bit and then take out her do a magic spell and kind of take out all of her ferociousness, and then she became this joyful goddess. And that is the reason why some people sometimes people refer to her as the right eye of Ra because they believe that her former identity was Sekhmet. And that is one of the many stories that if you Google or you research, you will see that story coming up a lot regarding Hathor. And
yeah, and I'm just gonna segue into this because I think I know what you're talking about. Because yeah, I do remember saying that this story in particular was an extremely complicated one, especially if we've already given them Sekhmet and Bastet's story at the same time. A lot of people are going to be, and that's what I mean, guys, by this gets really convoluted because you're confused because you're like, are they three in one? Are they the same goddess, Hathor, Bastet, and Sekhmet? So in some cases, yes, they are. And in some cases, let's just throw Bastet out the window and say that
yes,
Sekhmet gave rise to Hathor. And I think this is a fun way. This is
yes,
not really pop culture, but we'll probably touch on it more. This kind of, if we're segueing from that, where this kind of segments into, because Sekhmet represents everything violent and
yes,
angry, war, like disease. I mean, she was a killer on levels you can't even imagine. Like it was very terrifying. So to see someone so joyous and happy and who represents love of the skies, the universe, the gods themselves and humans and everything like that come out of that, it's a very nice theme which I've heard over and over
yes,
again, and it keeps playing in my mind. I think this is what you were talking about when you mentioned that I kind of maybe wasn't sure about getting into it. It's a theme that keeps popping into my head
yes.
whenever I
Basically,
read the story, and it's basically that hate comes from love, or love stems
yes.
from hate.
Yes, exactly that. So, for the moment, if you guys can throw out that set for a moment, and this is that kind of story that you will see repeatedly. If you look up Hathor, you will see repeatedly the name of Sekhmet. So she has a very close connection, and the cross between Sekhmet and Hathor will almost always come up if you do research. I think this is a very good version. Like Alyssa said, hate come from love and love come from hate. You want to get rid of hate, then you have to love. If you want to get rid of love, you have to hate. So that's kind of how, if that is a story you want to go with, it's a very good story.
Although they
But
kind of tell it backwards, because in my mind, it's kind of been seen, just because it's very interesting to me that they would tell the story love coming from hate, even though if you think about it, hate comes from love. Because if you think about it, why you actually, when you hate something or you strongly dislike something or you feel that amount of hurt, it's because you used to love it. It was something that was very precious to you, and to have it gone now is, it leaves a very empty and horrible feeling from it, thus the hate being birthed from love. But in this case, they have hate and anger and all of these things birthing love itself. And that's a very,
yeah,
I'm kind of side-eyeing the Egyptians right now. Like, what was supposed to be happening here?
well, I think what's supposed to be happening is that reformation of that. You're reforming from your older self. You're trying to rebirth yourself into that new, that kind of reform atmosphere. Like you become a new person, a better person. In a way, you're leaving all of that toxicity behind, and maybe that is where they're getting to. But myself, I like that story, but that is not the story that I think I want to go with. Just for the reason that I think Sekhmet and Hathor has very little in common, and that the story could have come from a later time where people start getting creative. When these two goddess gained their fame and their popularity.
That is
This
true. A more prosperous time, because if we remember correctly from the Isis story, we did have that time where supposedly it was the time of Osiris's death, where Set was ruling, and that was just a miserable
Yes,
time for everyone. And in some
yes,
stories, I actually did research this, and I found out that in some stories where Set is ruling during that time period is where Sekhmet, you will see her around a lot, which is weird because
yes.
she has her own story, but they appear kind of cohesively. So maybe that was meant to
Uh-huh.
signify a part in history where Egypt was really going through the struggle,
Yeah,
and so that was like, okay, we
exactly.
got her to.
Yeah, I think
Anyways,
that's because Segment was rising to popularity, and I think this is where the story comes from. Again, speculations. This is not fact. I'm not saying that I read it from like an original papyrus or anything, but like that is what I think would happen because these two goddess, they barely cross paths. And I really think that their path has only, met each other because of human interference. And like I said so many times, and I will keep saying it, mythical stories are meant to change. They're meant to be creative. They're meant to be passed around. Like, for
They're
example,
literally used to explain the world, to
yes,
understand the world
yes,
around you.
exactly. So, like, I mean, these things happen. But I have a second story,
Oh,
and
before you get the second story, I just want to,
uh-huh.
just for just because it also gets a little bit more complicated, and this is also probably why I said I wasn't, we weren't really, both of us weren't really sure about this story, the Hathor, for the Sekhmet to Hathor story, also because it gets a little bit more complicated if you really listen to the story, because at one point, because Hathor is considered the right eye of Ra, and that's her tied to Sekhmet, as Sekhmet was also birthed from the right eye, and Hathor came about from Sekhmet. Hathor is also called, when she's called the right eye of Ra. I know before in the Isis story, I said that humans were created technically because Ra cried tears because of his children being gone, and
Oh, I
it
know what
thus
you're
birthed
talking about.
humanity. Yeah. So in some stories, they actually say that Hathor, humans didn't exist until after Hathor. Hathor basically came along, and what happened is when his right eye, because he ripped out his right eye, supposedly, he grows a new eye, and Hathor is so jealous of the actual eye itself, of his right eye, his new eye that he has, that she cries so many tears that give birth to all humans, and this is part of her mother of the universe
Yeah.
title. That's what they try to tie it to.
Yeah, this story is actually like another short story, if you would take it. Is that one day Ra took out his right eye. There's something about this guy who he just keeps taking out his eye and trying to solve his
Plucking out
problem.
eyes.
Like, what is wrong with this guy? Like, I don't know. But basically, one day, two of his sons went missing, and he took out his right eye and be like, "Can you go find my sons, please? Like, I don't know where they went." And she came back with his son, and she found out that he has replaced his right eye. And so Hathor got so sad, she started weeping, and then her tears became humans because she was the eye of Ra. So that's why her tears is able to make men, make humans. But that is
She's
one.
literally a piece. Think Adam and Eve. The woman was taking a piece of Adam's rib. She is literally a piece of Ra
Yeah,
incarnate. And actually,
basically.
kind of in a way that kind of makes her, in my opinion, it makes her a little bit more powerful than Isis. I love Isis. I truly do. She's one of my favorites. But if you really think about it,
We're about to
Isis
get
is a
there.
descendant. But Hathor is and Isis, not for the lack of cleverness. Isis is definitely more clever than Ra. She's beat Ra at his own game multiple times. We've said multiple times she is the champion of Ra. But literally, and part of the eye of Ra, which is basically his personal, his personal entourage of basically goddesses, mainly goddesses, who are
Yeah, we're about
his
to
little
get there.
assassins. But yeah, she's literally a piece of Ra. She's a
Yeah.
straight up piece of Ra, his literal eye given human form, or given
Yes.
goddess form.
Yes. Well, I just really think that that can be counted as like a bonus, like another short story that we have for you guys, because I have come across that story as well, and I told Alyssa about it. But I think that that story is kind of, I wouldn't say not relevant, but it's not in my timeline. Like I said, I have a
Yeah, definitely.
timeline set out that because all of these mythical stories almost connect or cross paths. So I want to set up a good timeline for you guys to follow with us. And that is just another bonus that you guys can see. If you guys look it up, it definitely is there. And like there are way more. Like there's this goddess, this lady has so much origin story that it is driving me nuts. Like, how on earth did she birth from like 13 different story, or probably even more than that? And it's amazing how it is. But if you guys are following these stories and you guys want to create your own timeline for yourself and be like, oh, this is how it happens, this is how they cross paths with this guy, how this person cross paths with the other woman, then that is the way I want to set it up. And
If
that's
you do,
why.
please send them in. Like, I would
Yeah,
actually
definitely.
really love to like watch a podcast, or even like read. Like, I invite you guys to be creative. Like, I would love to read a story, or
Yes.
hear somebody's theory about how all of her stories are connected. If you have the brain power to do this, like, honestly,
I mean, if you
you're
do,
a real one.
like we would do a whole freaking videcast for you just because of the effort. Like, I mean,
Honorary guest, you are
yes,
invited
please. If
on
you
the
guys
show.
have the time, send it in. I would read it. I would read it out loud. I would read it on the podcast. I would go live with it, everything. But yeah. So Now moving on to the second story, and I think this story will really put the nail on the coffin. So another legend, and keep in mind that I will explain along the way, so don't freak out just yet. Just keep your head intact for a while. We don't want to lose our head like Isis did. So keep it intact for a while. I will explain. I promise. I promise. Okay. So if you remember our very first podcast on Egypt, that episode about Isis, it's a two-part episode. It's kind of long. It's kind of it's a good amount of complex, I would say. So remember that podcast where, okay, Isis and Osiris have a son. His name is Horus. He's the god of kingship. And he was battling his uncle, Seth, who kind of killed his dad a little bit.
Not
And
kind of, literally chops him up.
yeah.
Yeah. Causes him to
Kind
lose
of,
his favorite appendage, feeds it to a crocodile. It's a whole story.
Yeah, it's a family friendly story. And so Horus was like, I'm gonna kill you. And Isis was like, oh, he's kind of your uncle and my brother. Can we not forgive him? Forget, love and peace. And then he just got so furious with his mother that he literally cuts off her head.
Which kind of makes sense. If you raised me my whole life to hate this one person and whatnot, and when it's time to finish the job, you're just like, yeah, but not really.
I mean, I guess Isis just need to get her interest straight. So when she woke up, because Isis, remember what Alyssa said, she has beaten morality. She has literally, she's a goddess. She literally has beaten morality, because there are some god out there who still can die or grow old and then die. But Isis, she has came to that point where she's enlightening. She's just that goddess who's reached immortal. And of course, her head is still chopped off. So when she woke up, the first thing she did was find a replacement. And she found a cow's head. And she put it on. And that was like an identity change. And in one of the story that I read, when Isis got her head chopped off and she put the cow's head on, her identity changed and she became Hathor. And this story was really popular around the New Kingdom, where some people worship Isis and Hathor as one goddess. And I'm going to explain right now. I'm so sorry if I confuse you guys, but the reason why I believe this story, and again, this is speculation. This is the reason why I want to go with this story that Isis became Hathor, is because both of these goddesses have started out in cult. If you guys remember, like most of these goddesses starts out in cults, right? We know that they are started out with very little worshiper, and then eventually it grew. Well, both of these goddesses, Hathor and Isis, got their popularity, got their cult together around the third millennium. If you guys don't know what the third millennium is, we are actually living in a third millennium, but this is BCE time. So the third millennium back then is from 3000 BCE to 2001 BCE.
So before Christ and after Christ, if you guys know the difference before Christ and after
This is
Christ,
during the Old Kingdom, by the way. Yeah, basically back then the time is backwards. So just imagine us right now. We are living in the third millennium. Third millennium is from 2001 to 3000. So just flip that, and that's the time I'm talking about right now. 3000 to 2001 BCE during the Old Kingdom.
And for those of you who are a little offended and came on and said, wow, she's really having us do math. I came for a story. You're giving me math. Hold on. I promise you it's worth it.
It's worth it. Okay. My speculation. This is my purely speculation, and I plead, and really I really think that these two goddesses, Isis and Hathor, they really have way too much in common not to be from the same origin. I believe that either these two goddesses started out as two individual, because back then the news aren't very good, so you probably have two different region who started two different cult, but their goddess happened to be having the same power. It happens. And down the line, when the news start regulating through the country, these two goddesses like, oh, we have so much in common. Let's cross their story. So through the many people retelling this story, Isis and Hathor happens to cross one another, and they start out as two and then become one. Or this is another one. Or they started out as one person. Hathor and Isis could have started out as one person, but through changes, like the story, how Isis got her head cut off and she was revived with a cow head, and then she became a different person. Either they started as two, become one, or they started out as one and become two. I know that's a lot of math, but I genuinely believe that Isis and Hathor could have come from the same person.
Whichever way you do the math, though, you can definitely agree that they definitely divided and conquered.
Yes, definitely.
Thought process-wise, culture-wise, divide. They divided and they conquered.
Because, Alyssa, you remember what I told you is that I think that Hathor could have been the former identity of Isis. I mean, that equation got switched after I heard this story that Isis became Hathor. But now I think that it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense because of storytelling. Because if I go and tell someone a story and they go tell someone else, it changes. So over the time, I think that maybe these two goddesses happen to cross paths, or maybe they are the exact same person. Their identity just got split up through names. It's just really down to the name because honestly, these two have so much in common.
And honestly, if I think about it, I kind of agree. This actually makes so much sense. And it's so like that's that clean cutness and dryness that I'm talking about that Egypt has. It's clean cut. It makes sense. And even if it's in pieces, you know, it's not an edgeless puzzle. There's a way to put it back together. And this kind of, this would make sense to me. I feel like, honestly, the Sekhmet story was honestly kind of thrown in there. For a storyteller who maybe wanted a little bit more drama, more like, you know, like Medusa's story. Because I actually found out that the person that wrote his story, actually, the one that we told, actually, he had a problem with authority figures. Yes. And so that may have influenced the way he told the story. So someone probably just saw Sekhmet, saw that she was, because
just let me point out one more thing. I promise I will stop doing math, okay? I'm so sorry, guys. I don't mean to make you guys do math, but it's important. I swear, it is important. Because here's the thing. The reason why I believe that story, the reason why I have this speculation. And I don't care about Sekhmet because exactly what Alyssa just said. The Sekhmet story seemed very random. It just thrown in there.
Someone threw it in for drama.
Exactly. Basically, Isis and Hathor have so much in common. If you ever seen the picture, the way that these two goddesses has depicted, they both have cow horns and they have the sun disk, and they are both the mother of pharaohs. They have that role, and I just really think that over time, somewhere along the line of negotiation, especially during the please correct me if I am wrong, Greco-Roman. Did I say it right?
Greco-Roman, close.
Greco-Roman, especially during that time. You guys know that the ISIS cult got really popular. Well, some of these alliances are formed out of necessity. It is not meant to be selective. It just happened that ISIS caught the fame and she blew up. Hathor also
mainly because, like I said, and probably, like I said, just cutting it real quick, probably blew up because, and it's not like these people just randomly blew up.
Yeah.
They caught the fame not by chance. It was more of the fact, because like I said, back then, colonialism and taking over a place, conquering was different. It worked very differently. And a little bit, I am kind of a fangirl for this, because I'm not a fangirl for conquering people. I promise I'm not. But I'm more of a fan of this type of conquering than I am of what we do now. It's very disgusting what we do now. But back then, it was more of it's not an I'm going to eradicate your whole race. It's I'm going to take you and absorb you into me. So whatever. So it was more of
Sounds like
Isis embodies what most of our goddesses do anyway. So what they thought basically is, oh, so you basically worship the same God we do.
Yeah.
You're just calling her the wrong name, or you're just you translate, or maybe you or if I'm being nicer, maybe you just translated it into this name. So if we translate it over, it means this. But if we translate it over to your language, it means this. But either way, we get along because we can both worship the same person.
Yeah.
So that's who we're going to put in the spotlight when we take over.
Yeah. As weird as it sounds, it makes sense. I do find the sense in that. But right now, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to put in the chat, and you guys can look at it and see for yourself that the way that the Egyptians depicted Isis and Hathor are insanely similar. So I'm gonna go ahead and put a picture of Isis right now, and you guys see her, the mother of Egypt sitting on her throne, and next to her is her sister, her twin sister. What is her name again?
Nephthys.
Nephthys. Great. I can't never remember name unless it's important. But I'm so sorry. This is Isis, a picture of Isis and her twin sister. And you guys can see that she has the cow horns and then she has the sun disk because she is the daughter of Ra, and that she's been depicted as a cow, a celestial, a heavenly cow. Now, I am going to put a picture of Hathor, and please do tell me, what difference do you see? Because I don't see that much of a difference. This is Hathor, and I have circled her in the red ink, and you guys can see her. Almost the same thing. She has her queen headpiece, and then she has the sun disk and the cow horns, because she is also depicted as a cow in many, 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 many references. So you can see, Alyssa, do you see it? You see how similar they are?
I'm literally like falling over in my chair. I'm like, she looks exactly the same.
And I'm going to tell you guys right now, if you guys want to differentiate her, this is the way to differentiate her. Okay. So how do you tell these two goddesses different? Because they're the same. Literally, they are the same. The way they picture and envision. You can't tell me that these two didn't come from the same source. Literally, their cult started out around the same freaking time.
And literally the descriptions and even the epithets of the goddesses are literally the exact same epithets. Mother of Egypt, goddess of fertility, everything good, the universe, gives birth to everything, protector of kings, literally all over. But we've already explained that in the other podcast.
I'm not crazy, right? Like, you see it too, right, Alyssa?
No, that makes a lot more sense, because like I said, I was always confused. I was like, it just doesn't make sense why they're giving them the same powers. But if you worship them as one person, split them up, and it makes too much sense.
Yes. So you can see it. Okay, I'm not crazy. Finally, thank God I'm not crazy. I know I'm kind of insane, but I'm not crazy. So you can see here, Isis.
Like they're not synonyms.
Agree or disagree? Okay, so as you can see here, the picture that I label Isis. How do you differentiate them? Well, it's kind of easy, because usually it's not easy, but there's a way. I'm sorry, I misuse words sometimes. Isis is usually depicted with her sister. Her sister, Nephthys, has wings. And sometimes Isis is standing right beside her sister, and sometimes you can see both of them having wings as well. As for Hathor, if you scroll down, you can see Hathor. She is standing in front of what you see. It looks like a mummy. Basically, this is a picture of her standing before a person who's about to move on into the afterlife. Because one of her many, many roles, and this is why they call her the goddess of the living and the dead, is because one of her many roles is that she greets these people who have died at the gates of the underworld, and she provides them with food and water so that they can move on into the afterlife. She basically gives them a snack before they go on into the afterlife.
Which is another really unbelievable coincidence, because like we pointed out in the first story, Isis's story is literally built around literally nothing but the underworld, to the point where even some stories say that she raises a child that used to rule the underworld before Osiris. And I'm just like,
I'm not crazy. I'm telling you guys, I'm not crazy. Like, I know what I'm talking about sometimes.
My only thing that really stumps me, how in the world did the Egyptians look at all that she does? I understand, and I actually almost understand changing her into Isis. Isis makes sense as a magician goddess who is just practicing all arts, the first queen of Egypt, That's fine. Hathor doesn't make sense to me though, because it's like, how did you look at all of these things, all of these stories, all of this explanation and come up with, oh, she's just the goddess of love?
I don't
Like,
know.
how did
I
that come
mean,
into
people
death
have
and
different
life?
preference. People have, preferences. I can't speak for them, but I can see where these two meet. We have to make ends meet sometimes. So basically, Isis, she is usually depicted with her sister, Nephthys, the goddess with wings, or her husband, Osiris, the guy who's dressed as a pharaoh and but has like a body of a mummy. So that's how you tell that in the picture that is Isis. And then the way you tell, if you look at a painting, you want to see that Hathor is usually either greeting a mummy with food and drinks, or she is sitting and she's greeted with flowers or food or booze or something like that. And
Because
the
who
reason
wouldn't want
for
to be
that,
greeted in the afterlife like that? That's just a wonderful way to go. Just
well,
like,
well, not, sometimes you will see her in a picture with people giving her flowers and stuff like that. That is an act of offering because Hathor is also the goddess of joy. Remember, she's supposed to bring joy and celebration to everyone. So in a lot of papyrus, you will see her sitting like on a seat, and then someone will offer her flowers, or there are people dancing around her, or there's people offering her wine and stuff like that. That is how you tell Isis from Hathor. And if you're still confused, I am so sorry. It's Google time.
it's not a visual thing. It's definitely not a visual thing. You definitely have to pay attention to the actions, which is why I am so glad that the Egyptians had.
Yes.
Why am I blanking on the name of their writing? It's literally hieroglyphics. I'm
Hieroglyphics.
so glad they had hieroglyphics, because
Hieroglyphics.
you can actually, you'd be able to actually look at the actions. And I know that we also mentioned this in Greek mythology with the stock pictures that they drew. Not nearly as explanatory as what the Egyptians did in their hieroglyphics. So it's very helpful, especially when you have so many cultural changes that literally make all of the goddesses and gods so synonymous
Yes.
with each other.
Okay, so let's wrap up the origin, then we can move on to the worship thing and then the good part, okay? All this complication, math, science, social studies, we need to wrap it up. All right, so we know Hathor, the goddess of fertility. Go ahead, Alyssa. What's your punchline?
Oh, the goddess. Yes.
What's your punchline? All the goddess is, or the
Literally
goddess?
every single goddess is the goddess of fertility at this point.
Yes.
Everyone is the goddess of fertility. And I think I might even look that up for our next podcast. I've got to research, I've got to figure out why in the world. And I know that the Egyptians
Fertility
put a
is
lot
good.
of, I mean, fertility is good, but I've never seen a culture focus on it so much, unless I just haven't read enough books. I haven't been around that much. You know what? This podcast is going to help us do that, because we're going to be all around the world. But I don't think I've ever seen a myth or any type of mythology that focuses so much on fertility. And fertility can mean a lot of things. It can mean,
Repopulating.
yes, of course, our favorite, our apparently the favorite of most humans, although not enough, thanks to some of the laws that are being put in place. Not going to mention those, but
Okay.
but could be repopulating, could be fertility as in the fertility of the ground, bringing forth seeds and a fruitful harvest.
Yes.
And so in a place like Egypt, where it is basically in the desert, you're not coming by this stuff easily.
Well, I mean, people will people. Who knows?
Oh yes, definitely. But every goddess that we have read about, Eye of Ra, like I said, that can be explained. Literally, his circle of assassins, his circle of goddess / assassins, that you basically carry out the will of Ra. But at the same time, every goddess that I've seen so far is the mother of kings, protector of kings, or some kind of goddess of fertility.
Oh, yeah.
It's always fertility.
Well, I mean, people have to have some way to interpret them, and I guess their ideas are always kind of the same. They just change up like the knickknacks and stuff like that. So Hathor is the goddess of love, fertility, and that's why women and mother likes to pray to her so that they can have like a successful pregnancies or birth. And actually, Hathor is usually depicted as a heavenly cow. And cows are considered like very essential animals in this ancient civilization because they provide milk. And every child needs a source of milk. So therefore cows are very respected during this time. So
it's literally to the point where literally they have stories about Hathor actually, and actually in some people will tell you sometimes that actually Hathor, she actually acted kind of as a nursemaid, which is a
yes,
very weird role for a goddess to play. You don't picture a goddess getting all down there and delivering a baby, but that's how invested she was in her job.
yeah,
That she was
she's
right
doing
there
her
beside the
job.
nursemaid, delivering, getting
Yeah.
down there, delivering the baby.
Yeah, she's doing her job. Like literally, you have a guy's right there looking over the birth of your child, and that makes you feel safe. If it's like a form of religion, then yeah, I feel safe. Like I know that there is someone powerful watching over my kid, so I feel good. I
Putting
feel
their hands on your kid, that in itself is a very powerful evidence.
yes,
Like
you
a
you
powerful symbolism.
like literally, you have a whole freaking goddess being taking your child from you, and nurturing them, helping them into this world. What's more better? That they do believe that the pharaohs, like of course it goes back to the pharaohs, but they believe that the Egyptians believe that when the pharaohs are born, that they are actually breastfeed by Hathor. Like Hathor is their first mother, their first wet nurse,
And it
and that's
adds
why
to their it literally adds to their divinity. Like think of it as like
golden light, a whole freaking golden light just shines on them.
golden ambrosia, like the magic ambrosia.
Like the pharaohs, like all of the pharaohs are considered her son. Like she literally nurtured them. She give them that extra, like Hercules, like boom, like you're boosted. You're half immortal now.
Divinity bestowed.
Exactly.
Hathor out.
Yes. Okay, so do you have anything to add before we move on to worship? The worship is going to be kind of short, and then we're going to go to the good stuff, the popular culture.
Oh yeah, I definitely want to throw in a little bombshell there because I heard you say if that was you, and it was funny because in my mind, and this might be a future podcast, you guys. You never know.
Dear.
Maybe
Oh,
I'm going to drop the little bombshell. Is that some people might, somebody probably in the audience, someone thought it. I know someone had to think it. Guys, don't make me look crazy. Someone thought it. When she said it, someone probably thought, yeah, that's cool, but you wouldn't have been a pharaoh because you're a female.
Oh, you're so wrong.
That is wrong. For
yes.
those of you who thought maybe, women could not be pharaohs, you are both right and wrong. And for those of you thinking of Cleopatra, stop. No, not that. No. Cleopatra was amazing, but no. There were actually female pharaohs who referred to themselves as him, pharaohs, kings of Egypt. And maybe we'll get into that later. Who knows? Just wanted to drop that little bombshell. That's
we're definitely we're gonna dig deeper, but later, somewhere in the future, maybe 20 years from now, or maybe 1 year from now, or 1 month from now. Who knows? Who knows? Timeline is hard. Time is hard. Okay. Let's move on to the worshiping because we spent like 50 minutes on that.
Look,
I'm so sorry, guys.
That type of story.
I'm so sorry, guys. It's not meant to be this long, but we have to make sure you guys understand it because it's so complex. It's so interchangeably knotted. Like, I don't know how it works, but yes.
And I promise we're not doing this on purpose. Like, we have not told these stories in order on purpose, but they somehow managed to go in order and literally give you the story of Egypt. Like, it's really weird.
And we're not doing it on purpose, but it works out in our favor. So, yay!
Oh, yes.
Okay, so worshiping. We're on the worshiping part. I promise this part is very thin. I promise it's going to be quick. Not have to break my promise. No. Okay, great. Okay, during the second millennium, I'm not going backwards. Time is going backwards during this time. It's BCE. I know we just went from the third to the second, but that's how it works. Times go backwards in BCE. Keep in mind. So, during the second millennium, Hathor rose to her peak of popularity. Egyptian rulers during this time actually a lot of temples and shrines to worship Hathor. So she was indeed popular in Egypt. It's not because that she's not as popular as Isis, that she was like the underdog. No, she was pretty popular. And she used to have like the most number of temples compared to all of her fellow gods, but most of them are destroyed now. One of them, a very famous temple, is called the Dendera Temple. It's located in the Upper Egypt. It is actually the main shrine dedicated to this goddess. And people who are sick would come to this place for healing because one of her many talents is also healing. this building is actually kept till today. You can look it up. It's called the Dendera Temple. It is kept to today, and it's one of the most popular geographic right now in Egypt. It is still standing to this day.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
we love that. We love seeing that some of it actually survived.
Yes.
Although, like I said, I'm always salty when I see that we've lost pieces of history so easily. And what
Yes.
did Victor Hugo say? This will kill that, and this book and whatnot will kill, and this colonialism will kill the edifice. It will kill everything. Just
Well,
like
man, I mean, not a good thing, because a lot of, if you've been following us a lot, we always dedicate our time of worshiping to the temples, because a lot of them are destroyed, and like a lot of Hathor's temple has been destroyed as well. But at least we know that some are still remaining, and then we have such a beautiful temple still standing today, and it's like a national place where people come and still visit and still, maintaining the artifacts there. It's a very good thing to know.
Yep.
Okay. So moving on. So despite being in a little shadow of Isis, not a big one, a little one, Hathor's cult still maintained its popularity, especially during the Greek and Roman domination period. Her cult actually went past the Egyptian border. So it did go outside of Egypt and into the foreign lands such as, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Canaan.
Canaan. It's
Canaan.
Canaan.
Canaan and Nubia. So she did very much went past the Egyptian border. Maybe not as far as Isis, but she was still very popular. And until the New Kingdom period, Hathor was one of the most famous goddess in Egypt. And
And
of
we're going to
course,
get to Canaan. We're definitely going to get to Canaan in pop
yeah.
culture time, because
And
for those of y'all who understand your biblical
uh-huh.
history as well, that means something to you. Canaan means something to you.
Mm-hmm. So sorry that I can't pronounce things, for God's sake. And just know that there's going to be a lot of words later that I will mispronounce. I am so sorry. Feel free to correct me, because I know I cannot pronounce, for God's sake. But yeah, just that's a warning. That's a warning right there. Who's like triggered by mispronunciation, I'm so sorry. But that's me. Okay, so until basically Hathor being one of the first deities, she is considered a very powerful goddess on the Egyptian pantheon. Like, her powers primarily include the ability to fully nurture an individual and also the whole population. She is very widely worshipped, and people would pray on her like as like a guardian for like protection. And a famous example would be that ancient Egyptian soldiers would call upon her for like strength and concentration during battles, or when a woman is having difficulty bearing children, or if they're going into labor and they have like a difficult birth, they would pray diligently to Hathor so that she can look over them, because she's like the goddess of sexuality, childbirth, maternal care, women, children. She watched over each and every single children from beginning to end, basically when they're born until they die. That's why you see them. That's why you see her at the beginning of birth, and you see her at the end of your life journey in the afterlife. She has power to, fix women's problem.
And at the
of
same time,
birth.
I'm thinking that's probably how they got the goddess of love out of that. Like, if I'm speculating after seeing all this, it took me doing it a couple of times and reading it a couple of times, but even now, like, I think it just now sunk in now how they got goddess of love out of all of this, because I'm like, what kind of goddess of love? I truly believe she's a different type. We'll get to that in pop culture later when we talk about her connection, her versus
definitely.
Aphrodite, but like her as a goddess of love, for someone to be there for you through death and through life, literally in your wedding vows. Like, that is a very powerful thing, and I can definitely see how they got goddess of love, but I'll touch that later.
Yet she was not exclusively worshipped by women, because unlike other goddesses, she had both male and female priests. Literally, males and females worship her. They pray to her. Like, for example, that Egyptian soldier would call on her for strength and like concentration during battle. That's what she do. She protect people. She protect all of the people. She protect them as a population, not selectively. And like, her priest can actually is known to like read fortune of like newborn child, and
which makes sense because love doesn't discriminate. AKA love wins.
Okay, true love.
Wins.
Okay. Okay, we can save that for Disney. Her priest can actually read the fortune of like newborn children, and they can act as like an oracle, explaining people's dream and stuff like that. So kind of spiritual a little bit, especially towards children and stuff like that. But all in all, it's in honor of goddess Hathor. So great, we have ended the worshiping part, and now is the part that Alyssa's been waiting for because it's her hour. It's not actually an hour, people. Don't freak out.
No,
We're
it's
not gonna
not an
stay here.
hour.
We're not gonna stay here for another hour, but we're gonna take our time explaining this, and you would want to hear this. So go ahead, Alyssa.
So pop culture hour, and I think we should actually we'll clash seven. This is not that long, and I think we'll clash the Seven Hathors into this as well because that's
Ugh.
basic. It's basically. I read through it. It's basically pop culture.
Okay, go ahead.
At this point, it's basically pop culture, but pop culture references for Hathor. So first of all, Julie put this in here. I personally would have liked for it to stay buried, but she wanted to talk about the Gods of Egypt movie.
Why should we bury it? We should put it into light. Like, I don't get what's going. Have any of you watched the God of Egypt movie? Literally, I have not watched it. Alyssa have, but I've only watched a film analyst of it. And to be honest, I don't understand the point. Why is there a human and a god, and how does their freaking path cross? How is this guy getting on the throne happen to relate to this guy trying to find love? Like, what is going on? Why is it relevant? Why is it relevant that their path cross?
I got you. So I suggested this a while back. I suggested the Gods of Egypt movie for anyone who just is absolutely just does not like, you've never had an interest in Egypt. You don't get Egypt. Not saying it's a good movie because it's kind of not, but like, but it's not. I'm sorry, it's not. But if you're into all the regal gold, the gods sitting on their thrones, the instant battle, like random battle action scenes, I guess, then you'll probably it's a good way to start, like, pique your interest in
oh wow.
I personally was not piqued by this. I had always been intrigued by mythology as a kid, and I read all the books, but I was really excited when I saw that Gods of Egypt was a thing, because me and my brothers, we were really big on mythology, and we were really big in Egyptian mythology at some point. We really wanted to know about it, and this kind of piqued my interest. While I do agree it wasn't a good movie, it did pique my interest because the lore around it is very interesting, although they kind of marvel it up a little bit. They kind of and when I say they marvel it up, I mean they really.
Yeah, understand.
Norse mythology has never been so. I love Marvel, don't get me wrong, but the way they just mix up Norse mythology is kind of what they do in Gods of Egypt. Only it's worse, because at least in Norse mythology and Marvel, it's a superhero movie. We're not really trying to stick to the source material. We do what we need with the source material to make story. Gods of Egypt is supposed to be the actual story, and yet it just completely bulldozes over it. But Hathor, basically, Gods of Egypt is basically about
your voice literally went up a notch. Like, literally, when you said God of Egypt, your voice went up a whole nother ladder. Like,
it's so infuriating. I'm not gonna lie, it looks cool. It looks so cool.
But no, it's very beautiful. It's very beautiful. The set and stuff like that, the character design looks very beautiful. But the plot sucks. I would never write something like this. Or I would never, if I write something like this, I would not put my name on it.
And I mean, it was, and I mean, I wouldn't say it's completely bad. Like, if you watch it just to watch it, if you're like one of those people that, like, I like junk food for TV, this is definitely something to watch. But I also think if you're a person who you just want to see the action scenes, you like beautiful scene work and just how it works. Yeah. And even like the acting, now that I'm older, I'm not as big a fan of it, but it's a pretty good start if you want to pique your interest, because it has the storyline on paper is pretty nice. Basically, they're living in a world, and I think if you watch the full thing, Julie, maybe you'll understand a little bit more. I think
I've seen enough. I think that film analyst gives me everything I need to know about this. Like, literally, what is going on? Why is it relevant? So, but yeah, continue.
So basically, we're living in a world run by Set. So if we go back to the Isis, it takes part after the Isis, during a little bit of the Isis and Osiris story. We've cut out Osiris completely, although we do have Horus here. We've come kind of after Set has already taken over. The world is in absolute disarray. It's kind of trash. And so we go to the battle of Horus. This is more about Horus and Set's story, which this is an actual story. If you go after after, we mentioned the seven scorpion story with Isis. After she's raised her son up, her son comes back for the throne, and it's not an instant like European, and I kind of like that. Most European stories or stories like that are a one and done. It's more of a Gilgamesh kind of journey where it's like,
It's
oh,
not fair. It's not fair how Horus lost an eye and that other guy didn't lose his other part.
I mean, he kind of does.
No, he didn't.
Not in the movie, he doesn't, because I guess it would be too grotesque. But it's either way, it's not a one and done. When they have their story, if you read the actual story, it's not a one and done like Beowulf coming in, slaying the monsters, and we succeeded. He fights with his uncle for years. The first fight, he loses his eyes, and Horus loses his favorite appendage, his own missing piece. Retribution for his father being robbed of his. But I guess they don't add it.
Karma's a B. Karma's a B. I will say it again.
Or a D in this case, a missing D, I guess.
But you can't have a D if it's not there anymore.
True. But either way, this takes place during that story. He basically has lost his eyes, and in this story, they make the gods seem so freaking selfish, which, based off of what we've just told you, they are far from it. But they make them look like very selfish, horrible people who abandoned them when Set was taking over, which kind of did happen, but not necessarily. But he said they basically abandoned. Horus lost his eyes. He's no longer a champion, and they forget the whole part where he keeps coming back to fight him and where they have a whole thing. But they basically say that Horus loses his eyes. He goes into hiding, leaves the world at Set's mercy. Everyone is kind of screwed except for Hathor, who she appears, and that is why she's relevant to today's story.
Hathor is badass. She was very badass in the movie, but
she plays the main role because she is his wife in this one. She is his lover in this one, and they have a whole estrangement or some kind of argument. I didn't really pay attention because I wasn't really paying attention to that. I kind of like the fact that she had really cool powers, which is really what we're going to focus on for Pop Culture Hour.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, basically. Well, she is, like, in the movie, she's still the goddess of love, and she's still the goddess of, like, beauty and joy, because she is all of those things.
Pretty much. And even in the movie, I thought this was kind of dumb when I was little because, like I said, I knew the stories. And so, but now that I'm older, I kind of see where they were trying to get this, because there's a lot of little Easter eggs. Like at one point, he finds one of his eyes, but his right eye remains missing and covered, like almost like raw. And that's kind of funny to me.
I don't get it, but okay. I can't understand this movie, and I don't even want to try. Like, it's just gonna hurt my brain cells.
Well, we at least have to understand Hathor's part in it. Hathor has this scene. Okay. I think it's probably one of her coolest scenes where she's fighting a giant basilisk. It's a giant snake monster. A basilisk is a giant snake.
Oh, so yeah. She used her power, like basically her power. Like when you think about love beats all, here you go. Like Hathor, bring her in. That's it.
Yeah, definitely. It's a horrifying situation, fire breathing everywhere, giant basilisk snakes just all over the place. And she stops one of them, and it is in a murderous rage. It's being controlled by one of Set's men or women. I'm sorry, because, if you wanted good warriors, I guess in Egypt, go get the women. But,
True. For sure, a woman, like a man, literally will walk away and be like, "I beat him," but a woman will not walk away until you're completely down.
They really finish the job. But
either way. Exactly. I mean, I would do the same thing. Like if I was gonna beat someone, I'm not just gonna leave them there. I'm gonna beat them until I know they're not gonna come back.
Well, unless you're Isis.
We do not speak of that.
Either way, yeah, so basically they're looking at her, and this basilisk is very frightening. No one can control it except Set's men because it's a whole powerful magic thing. So, and this I think this really is interesting because it kind of talks about, it shows, we've already connected dots between Isis and Hathor. And Isis, we mentioned, was a very powerful sorceress. And the snakes are controlled by magic and spells. And so the fact that literally they are these very powerful creatures, and Hathor is the only one that can get them to calm down. She literally does nothing. Her eyes kind of do this glowing thing in the movie, and that's how her powers are, I guess, kind of activated. But she just speaks very softly to the snake, and she even the snake has like a little javelin stuck in its mouth because Horus has stabbed it and everyone's trying to fight it. And
Wow.
while everyone is fighting and running for their lives, it's actually kind of hilarious that she like walks up calmly to the snake, stops it dead in its tracks. She doesn't even use violence. She literally says, "Oh, you poor creature, that's just a horrible way to sit." Takes out the javelin, like she tells it, she does this come hither motion, and basically takes out the javelin and tells it, you know, it's like, "I'm sorry this happens to you." She's rubbing it. This is fearsome creature. Everyone is running for their lives. People are fighting for their lives. And she's just having a good time. Just like, "Let me stroke your face. Make sure you're okay. My little puppy dog. Aren't you adorable?"
Yeah, of course. I mean, love is a very powerful magic.
It's very powerful, and it has a level of compulsion to it, and that actually is, I think, where they get her powers. They're very creative with Hathor. That's what I'll say. I love the way they portray Hathor, because they show the compulsion of love, the compellingness of love, how it can even soothe very dangerous creatures or really horrible creatures. It kind of is the thing that stops you in your tracks. It's a very all-encompassing, compelling, and powerful thing. This monster literally, she literally does this thing where she tells it, and I think they kind of got this a little backwards, but she tells it to warm itself, and she just smiles at it, and it basically self-destructs and kills the rider along with it. But
oh my,
love being used in a different way, but her being the mother of the universe, I guess, and just having this power. Like I said, you have the enchantress Isis part of her, where you use compulsion, and you have the magic, using magic overriding the magic that's being used to control this being. You have the love part, where the compulsion to tell the snake, you don't even have to lift a finger. All you had to do was tell it to, come here and stop in its tracks, and it did. She's speaking very softly, she doesn't have to. She's the mother, and then her being a mother and a caretaker. She doesn't even just, I mean, it kind of bowls over when you tell the snake to blow itself up, but she doesn't let it suffer. There's a different way that she could have killed it. Everyone's stabbing at it. She takes all of the sticks out of its mouth, make sure that it's okay, because she is still the mother basically of the universe. And so I like the way they depicted Hathor in this.
I need to find someone like her for my dog. Literally, I can't deal with it. Like, I'd be screaming and yelling, and that thing just look at me like, you're saying something? And just like, what? Okay, I need one of those. I need one of Hathor's. Like, I don't want her to self-destruct, but I want her to listen.
Yeah, I mean, I bet if you were Hathor, she probably would listen to you a little bit.
Unfortunately, I'm not.
Tears. You could try doing the little blinking thing she does in the movie. It's it bothers me to a certain extent, because it's just like, but it's actually kind of hypnotizing. Yeah. It fits her character, I guess. But yeah,
she is very badass in the movie.
Yeah, I don't care for her love story with Horus, though. And I think that's another pop culture thing I want to touch on. The goddess of love who can't find romantic love for herself. And I think that's very
that's the bottom of it. That's like one of those very ironic things. I don't know how it happens, but it happens.
Yeah, she almost reminds me of Aphrodite Uranus, and we didn't talk about this because we wanted to make Aphrodite's story more fun. But if we ever go back to Greece, we will talk about the different levels of Aphrodite, because, like I keep mentioning, she was never Aphrodite Pandemos, and that is basically the people's Aphrodite. That's the Aphrodite we all know, flighty, kind of love struck, will do whatever she can to maintain her OTPs and no OTPs. But it's like,
oh my,
yeah.
Aphrodite is a different story.
Yeah, she used to be more of a Uranus love, like a universal love. But in Egypt, that is more Hathor's role, rather than romantic or just sexual. She is a universal love. That's the kind of love that she brings. And so I kind of feel like it's a little bit almost kind of, it's a little bit liberating, but also kind of weird that she doesn't have her own love story. And even the most they give her with Horus is barely a love story. Like it's not very, I don't know. I've never cared for their romantic story, and it doesn't seem as romantic as, say, Isis and Osiris.
It's not like detailed. It's not like specifics in there. Like, they just really say that, she could have been coupled up with this guy, and not many dive into her personal life. So it's like, I guess we just really focus on her being, the all around woman who just goes everywhere and help everyone, which is good enough. So the Greek kind of associate her with Aphrodite, which I think it's kind of off, because it's not real. They're not really equivalent, because
the only thing they have in common is that neither of them really ever get true love, romantic love themselves, which is kind of sad.
Yeah. So that's really it.
So
So
busy giving love that they can't get any, and it's kind of sad.
it's sad. It is kind of sad. Well, more for Hathor than Aphrodite because Hathor is actually kind of decent. But yeah, well, we can move on from that. Of course, the movie. It's sorry, but we can definitely move on to that too.
We've already touched the mother of fertility and kind of what that really means
Yeah.
for Egypt.
So
I
now we
guess
can we can touch the biblical reference now.
yes, Canaan. I find that very and we've already touched the love and hate from Sekhmet, so I'm not going to touch that again. So basically, touching on the biblical parts of Egypt, you cannot have Bible without Egypt. For those of you who have ever read the Bible, even if you
Basically.
are or are not Christian, I would definitely suggest reading the Bible. It's a wonderful read, actually, very interesting. Um, literally, like it's so interesting. The stories you'll find are just amazing. But literally, Canaan is, aside from Egypt, the next biggest place, especially in the First Testament, that you will probably hear about in the Bible. That's a really big deal. Besides Egypt, because Egypt is literally everywhere. Cannot have Bible without Egypt. And like I said in one of our old podcasts, a lot of Egyptian lore definitely takes a lot from the Bible. There is a lot mentioned about the firmaments and how they
Yeah.
are formed, and they just basically take the nature and make it. The Egyptians have that habit of taking the nature and giving it anthropomorphic features, and that's pretty much how they get most of their gods and goddesses. If you notice, most of them have animal heads, and only Isis really has an explanation for that. But Canaan is another big place in the Bible, especially because it was supposed to be the promised land for the Hebrews, well, not Hebrews, the Israelites, after they were freed from slavery in Egypt. And so Canaan is, I think Canaan was supposedly the land of, I really don't want to be wrong. And I feel like there's someone out there. If you are, please correct me. And I definitely will correct myself on the next podcast, but I'm really sure of this. Canaan was supposed to be the promised land, the land of milk and honey after all of their suffering and being enslaved in Egypt.
Oh, I've heard of this story. Yeah, I've heard of this story. I'm not a Christian, so I really don't know most of the story, but this is a really famous story. So we probably, like, a lot of people out there probably have heard it. You guys probably have seen a lot of like shows and segments on it, and I think everyone can really.
Oh yeah, and if you have not, I would suggest watching. What is it called? I'm just giving movie references today, apparently. But
But it is pop culture hour.
if you've ever seen, oh yeah, definitely is pop culture hour. If you've ever seen, if you're not familiar with the story, or even the, you're like, what? Egyptians enslaving Israelite? What? What?
Yeah, it's a very famous tale. It is a very it's always referenced in some kind of like Egyptian movie, or probably even referenced in like these movies where they go back and search for like Egyptian treasure or something. It's always referenced.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like and it's a huge part of the Bible, the book of Exodus, as well as, and I think it goes into the book of Moses. That's when they actually find the promised land,
Yeah.
also known as Canaan. But if you are very interested in also figuring out about Egypt and how it ties in with biblical stories and biblical culture, I suggest The Prince of Egypt by DreamWorks. It is a beautiful, beautiful movie. Christian or not, you will love it. I promise you. You will cry. You will love it. The soundtrack is amazing. The artistry in it, and even like the backgrounds, it's just gorgeous. Everything about the movie is just. I've read it. I've watched it so many times, like since like I was a kid, and I still love it and still cry for it. Right.
Oh my.
Now. But
okay. A lot of movie reference today, but okay.
Oh yeah, it is pop culture hour. So. But either way, Canaan, I'm very interested in Canaan because I know there is one part specifically where when they are going into the promised land, promised land is not always without people. In fact, rarely is the land without people. And, when you are new people coming in, the Israelites were actually told at some point that they would have to fight for certain amounts of land, or they would have to, I guess there's no nice way to say that they would have to take over the land and, kind of deal with the people who are already present there. So,
colonization, call it out as it is.
I got to figure out what to call it. And like I said, I got to get more clear on the story. But Canaan is
invaders. That's what they're called, invaders.
I mean, I guess, but like Canaan would be one of those major, and that's why I said if you've heard of Canaan, it's very interesting to me that Hathor's worship stretched to Canaan,
Yeah.
when the Canaanites were actually originally Israelites who kind of had taken that land, because in the Bible it says that God had given them that land. That was the land that was meant to be theirs. It was their promised land
Oh
for
my.
all of years of servitude and slavery and all of that. So I find it very interesting that Hathor was so widely worshipped in Canaan, and I'd like to kind of tie that. I'm speculating and tying that to that happening at sometime before, especially since that was in BCE, before Christ, and the Old Testament is also BCE, before Christ. I would speculate that that's probably before the Israelites came in and claimed the land. That was probably a part of the culture there. So for those of you who are Christian, that is very interesting for you, because now you're probably going to be like, hold on a minute, wait a minute, back that up. So you mean to tell me that mythology and all this stuff that I've been told, everything kind of links? Yes, everything links together. It's always fun whenever I see that, because I'm always
Yes. Remember when we said the timeline? This is the reason why. This is the reason why we want to pick the best version that line up with our timeline, so that we can have a good story straight through. Not necessarily needs to be straight, but it definitely keeps us on track. This is the reason why. Time is everything. That's why I'm making you guys do math. It helps.
Yeah, and I would definitely say that is, like I said, if you are a Christian, that is news to you, fun for you to figure out how everything connects. If you are not a Christian, it is still fun for you, because a lot of people tend to think, okay, this is a lot of people don't give. I don't feel like Christianity is given all the credit it can be for how interesting, especially even if you aren't Christian, how interesting the stories can be. And like I said, if you don't believe me, Prince of Egypt, watch the movie. It's gorgeous. But that is all. That'll also give some of you guys some very interesting things to look up, some connections to find. And if you have another religion that we probably haven't mentioned, you would be surprised how you tie into everyone else's story. Everyone's story is interconnected, and that's it. It's all one story. It's very interesting how it all connects. But we are so quick to make sure that everything is so separate, and that we're doing all the
Yeah.
stuff to complicate it. But it's so interesting, and that's why I love stories and mythology, why we do this. It's easier to teach people about these things through stories, because stories can be changed, they can be whittled down, they can be interconnected. It's fun to put together the puzzle pieces. It's just a very good part of culture. And that's my TED Talk for today.
Yeah. Alyssa, I'm so happy that we actually have this together, considering how sleep deprived we are when we did this. I am so surprised. You guys will never imagine how sleep deprived we are at the beginning of this week. It was so weird. Our conversation seems like a dream. Like I didn't even believe that I talked to her like in that manner. Like the way we were like zombies driven on caffeine.
Oh yeah, at
Basically.
one point we were just like, Hathor is Sekhmet. No, Sekhmet is Ra. Ra is Sekhmet. Who?
What? Did you say you're gonna contact her? Wait, no. How can you contact her? Wait, you said contractor?
You said she's a doctor?
Yeah, it was bad, guys. You guys would never want to see that part of us, but luckily we won't have to.
And I think we've got really, really over time, and this will turn into 2 hours, and it'll be harder for people to come back and listen. I think we should make the Seven Hathors, because yes, guys, there is more. I think we should definitely do the Seven Hathors as like maybe a short, but I think it's very interesting, and I think they would really like to hear about it, because guys, having seven of one character that is this canonically just complicated, and actually come to think of it, that's probably why she's so complicated. She has 17 different origin stories, because there are 7 different versions of her. And when I say 7 different versions, guys, I don't mean different versions of stories. I mean she is 7 people in one.
Yeah,
literally 7 people.
A lot
in
of
both
things.
Cultures.
There's still like a huge chunk of info left. I think by this time your brain is kind of fried. So, what do you say about next week, Alyssa?
Yeah, we'll do it like a short podcast, a mini podcast on the Seven Hathors.
Much shorter than this one, thank God. Like, I'm so sorry we didn't mean to bombard your brain like this, but it was fun though for all you myth lovers out there. So yeah, and I guess we have fried your brain enough today. So definitely come back with us next week. We don't usually do weekly podcasts, but we usually do bi-weekly. But because this one is another thing that's connected to Hathor, so we're going to do like a mini segment, like maybe 30 minutes. Hopefully it's only 30. Yeah. So any last word, Alyssa?
Just that love is complicated, and so is Hathor.
We didn't realize it's so complicated, but yeah. next week we're gonna come back with the Seven Hathors. We're gonna figure out the time. Hopefully, we're not caffeine deprived zombies then.
Oh yeah.
But we can only wish. We can only wish.
Oh wait, I got it. Wait, I got my
Uh-huh.
last words. I got it. So
Go
love is
ahead.
complicated.
She's
So
still.
is Hathor, but it's
Are you
worth
still
it.
sleep deprived? You're still sleep deprived, aren't you?
No, I'm good. Okay, I got it. I got my last words. Hold on.
Go ahead.
So love is complicated. So is Hathor, but both she and love are worth it. Till death do they part. Quite literally for Hathor, because through life and death there is death.
She is actually that definition of like death do we part. I think I like that more on her than actual marriage vows, because that's there's no reason to keep that vow when there's divorce laws. Which I'm not saying I'm against divorce laws, but that seems kind of ironic, to be honest. That's my point of view. Like I'm sorry if I offended anyone out there, but that's really my opinion, and I think that some people out there will agree. But then again, see you guys next week. Bye, mortals. Have a great time. Do come back next week and see the Seven Hathors. And yes, there are 7 of them. But until then, mortals, make great choices. Don't do anything stupid, and definitely don't do anything that Hathor wouldn't do. Bye, mortals.
Bye, mortals.